in mind. And the comment was, it seemed to me that a story that only has one meaning isn't very interesting or worth remembering for very long. So this afternoon, I invite you to hear a variety of stories, both from the Bible and from a number of traditions. Some of them are funny, I hope. Some of them, I hope, will make you think. Some might be a bit disturbing. The title, the theme of this concert is Stories of Stories. And so all of the stories that I will be telling either have a story within them or some other component within them, or they build or a response, one story and answer to another story. Some may be more obvious than others. I love the image of the spiral. In a spiral staircase, you go to a landing, that is one story, but you keep building. And so stories build upon stories. Stories spiral in on each other like a nautilus, or like a symbol that reminds us that all is connected. I want to begin with a story by a rabbi and children's author named Sandy Sasso, called When God Gave Us Words. One day, God decided to give words to man and woman. But the angels objected. People will not know what to do with words. Words should only belong to angels. God said, maybe people will make something beautiful with words. Nothing is more wonderful than what we do with words, said the angels. But God was intent on putting words into the mouths of men and women. And so God filled the angels' sacks with words and gave them to the angels to take to earth to put in the mouths of men and women. In some of the sacks, God put long words like omniscient and anti-disestablishmentarianism. The angels frowned. People will never know the meaning of these words. And it was so. Because of long, difficult words, dictionaries were created. In some sacks, God put silly words like gibberish and goop and gosh. And in one sack, God put all the hard to spell words like hors d'oeuvres. The angels frowned. People will never know how to spell these words. And it was so. Because of difficult to spell words, God created spelling lists. When the sacks were full, God sent the angels to earth to spread the word. And when they returned, because they did what God commanded, they sat with God and listened and waited. It took a while for people to grow accustomed to using words. Carefully, they formed each word in their mouth. Slowly, they added word to word until they formed sentences. And once the people grew accustomed to using words, they talked and talked and talked until the angel said, enough. But God wanted to hear more. And then people twisted and turned words and told lies. They rolled words in the wet earth until they were covered with mud, and curses were created. They mixed words with thorns, and gossip was born. And the angels said, "Stop! What a mess people are making with our words." And God regretted giving words to man and woman. And God was just about to send the angels back to take the words back to heaven, when God heard a new sound. People stirred soft music into words, and they sang lullabies. People joined dance to words, and poetry was born. People mixed laughter and words, and then there were jokes. The angel said to God, "Some of these jokes are very funny, and some of them are just silly." And it was so. For the silly jokes, God created groans. And for the truly funny jokes, God just laughed. And then people mixed words with midnight and wrote mysteries. And when the angels listened, their wings trembled. People wove together longing and thanksgiving and hope, and they offered prayers. People mixed imagination with words, and then there were stories. The angels listened and were enchanted. God asked the angels, "Do you still want to take back the words?" And the angels remembered the lies and the curses and the gossip. Nevertheless, they did not want God to take back the words. They loved the songs and the poetry. They giggled at the jokes, and they cried during the prayers. "We must hear the end of the stories," the angels pleaded. And it was so. People were allowed to keep the gift of words for the sake of stories. Now we know that people talk, some more so than others. We don't necessarily in real life expect that other creatures talk. This is a story called Talk. It's an African tale. It's a bit repetitive, and so as we go along, you are welcome to join me. Near the city of Accra, along the Gulf of Guinea, there was a countryman who went out to his garden to dig up some yams to take to market. And as he was digging with his stick, he heard a voice say, "Now you show up. You never weeded me. And now you come with your digging stick to dig me up? I'd just as soon you leave me alone." The farmer looked around to see who was talking, and he saw a cow chewing her cud and looking at him, and he said, "Did you talk?" The cow just looked at him. But his dog said, no, it was the yam. He said, leave him alone. The farmer had never heard the dog talk before, and besides, he didn't like his tone of voice. So he got out a knife and went to the palm tree and cut down a branch so that he would whip the dog. And just as he was getting ready to, the palm tree said, put that branch down. He was getting ready to throw the branch on the ground when the branch said, man, do it gently. And so he gently put the branch on a stone. And the stone said, get that thing off of me. That was enough for the farmer. He took off towards the village, leaving it all behind. And on the way, he ran into a fisherman who had a fish trap on his head. And the fisherman said, where are you going in such a hurry? And the farmer said, my yam said, leave me alone. And the dog said, listen to the yam. And then I got a branch from the tree, and the tree said, put that branch down. And the branch said, do it gently. And the stone said, get that thing off of me. The fisherman said, is that all? Is that what you're worried about? Whereupon the fish trap said, well, did he take it off? The fisherman and the farmer took off toward the village, and they ran into someone who was a weaver with a bundle of cloth on his head. And he too asked, where are you going in such a hurry? And the farmer said, my yam said, leave me alone. And the dog said, listen to the yam. And the tree said, put that branch down. And the branch said, do it gently. And the stone said, get that off of me. And the man with the fish trap had said, and my fish trap said, well, did he take it off? The man with the bundle of cloth said, that's nothing at all, no reason to get worried about. Whereupon the bundle of cloth said, you'd run too if it happened to you. He too ran with the farmer. They came to a ford where a man was bathing. And he saw them running, and he said, are you chasing a gazelle? The farmer, breathlessly said, my yam said, leave me alone. The dog said, listen to the yam. The tree said, put that branch down. The branch said, do it gently. The stone said, get that thing off of me. And the fisherman said, and then my fish trap said, did he take it off? And the man with the bundle of cloth said, and then my cloth said, you'd run too. The bather started laughing at them and thought it was all very silly. And he said, I can't believe you. And then the river said, yeah, you'd run too. And run he did. So all four of them ran to the village, where they came to the end of the street where the chief lived. And when they arrived, his servant brought out the wooden stool. The chief listened to it, or sat on it, and listened to their complaints. The farmer went first. I was digging, and my yam said to me, leave me alone. And the dog said, listen to the yam. And the tree said, put that branch down. And the branch said, do it gently. And the stone said, get that thing off of me. And the man with the fish trap, the fisherman said, and my fish trap said, well, did he? And the man with the bundle of cloth had said, and my cloth said, you'd run too. And finally the man who had been bathing in the river said, and the river said the same thing. The chief listened very patiently. throughout this, but at the end, he was scowling. He said, "What a wild story. You go back to work before I punish you for disturbing the peace." And so they left. And the king muttered to himself, "It's nonsense like that just upsets the community." "Fantastic, isn't it?" said the stool. "Imagine a talking yam." We know that that is not a true story, not true in the sense of being factual. But did you know that there is a story in the Bible of a creature, not a human, that talks? This is the story of Balaam and his donkey. Now, it's probably important for you to know a little bit about Balaam. He's not particularly well known to us. Balaam, B-A-L-A-A-M. Now, Balaam was a prophet of sorts, and King Balak of Moab wanted Balaam to curse the Israelites because they were getting powerful. And God said, no. And the king sent messengers, and Balaam sent them back. And the king sent other messengers. And Balaam said, I need to talk to God about this. Which brings us to this story. That evening, God came to Balaam and said, if the men from Moab summon you, go with them, but say only what I tell you to say. So the next morning, Balaam saddled up his donkey and went off with the officials from Moab. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against him. And an angel of the Lord stood in the road with sword drawn in hand. Now, Balaam was riding his donkey with his two servants by him. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord with sword drawn, the donkey went off the road into the field. Balaam hit the donkey to go back onto the road. And the angel of the Lord moved a little further, where there was a wall on either side of vineyards. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, the donkey scraped against the wall so that Balaam's foot also scraped against the wall. And Balaam struck the donkey again. Then the angel of the Lord moved even further to a narrow place where there was no room to turn off to the left or to the right. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, the donkey sat down under Balaam. And Balaam got his walking stick and struck him again. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, who said to him, why have you struck me these 3 times? And Balaam said, Balaam doesn't seem at all concerned the fact that his donkey is now talking. Balaam said, because you have made a fool of me. I tell you, if I had a sword, I would kill you right now. But the donkey said, am I not your donkey that you have ridden your whole life? And am I in the habit of treating you this way? And Balaam said, no. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he could see the angel of the Lord with sword in hand. And he fell down with his eyes to the ground. And the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? I have come out as an adversary against you, because your way is perverse to me. 3 times I stood to oppose you, and if the donkey had not turned away just now, I would have killed you and let the donkey live." Then Balaam said, "I have sinned. I didn't know that you were there and that you opposed my way. If it is your will, I will return home." The angel of the Lord said, "Go with the men, but say only what I tell you to say." And so when they arrived in Moab, Balak greeted them at Ir-Moab, at the boundary of the Arnon, at the furthest point of the boundary. And Balak said to Balaam, "Why didn't you come when you called? Didn't I summon you? Did you think I couldn't honor you?" Balaam said, "I am here now. But do you think that I can just say anything? I can only say the words that God put in my mouth." Now the story goes on that Balak took Balaam to a place and they offered sacrifices, and Balak still wanted Balaam to curse the people. And after praying, Balaam stood and blessed the Israelites. That happened 3 times before Balak finally got the idea this wasn't going to work. How many of you are good at riddles? Riddles. This is some audience participation time. So this is the oldest known riddle, and it's Sumerian. A house, one enters blind and comes out seeing. Any ideas?
Pregnancy and birth.
Ooh, that's an interesting thought. That is a great one. That is not what the Sumerians were thinking.
Night today.
Night today, that's also a good thought. All of you teachers should appreciate it because it's a school. Here's one that is probably familiar to many of you. What creature walks on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at midday, and 3 feet in the evening?
Man.
Yeah.
Riddle the Sphinx.
Yes, it is the riddle of the Sphinx. Crawls, walks on 2 feet, and then with a cane in later life. Here's one that has been in a number of settings. As I was going to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives. Every wife had 7 sacks. Each sack had 7 cats, and each cat had 7 kits. Kits, cats, sacks, wives. How many were going to St. Ives?
1.
That's because they're all named. Doesn't mean that they're not all going with them. This is one from The Hobbit. Voiceless, it cries. Wingless, flutters. Toothless, it bites. Mouthless, it mutters.
I know it, but I've read The Hobbit like 8 times. So.
The tree might provide some help right now.
The wind.
The wind, absolutely, And here's one from Harry Potter. It's a riddle in 3 parts. The first is a person who lives in disguise, who deals in secrets and tells naught but lies. The second is always the last to mend, middle of middle and end of the end. Finally, give me the word that's often heard, the sound often heard during the search for a hard to find word. Now string them together and answer me this. What creature would you be unwilling to kiss?
Snake.
The middle one is D.
The middle letter is D.
You are right.
question?
A person who lives in disguise, who deals in secrets and tells naught but lies.
Oh, spider.
Spider, spy, D, and search for a hard to find word. And Barb happens to be wearing a spider necklace, I believe.
Yeah.
Thank you for that prop. Here's one more. And this one, if you know it, don't shout it out. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. Just by raise of hand, how many of you already know it? Samson. Samson went down to Timnah, and there he saw a Philistine woman who who caught his eye. Other stories. So Samson went back to his father and mother and said, I have met a Philistine woman who caught my eye. Get her for me as a wife. And his father and mother said, are there not women from among our own kin or among any of our own people that you have to go and get a wife from those uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said, get her for me. She's the one that I want. They didn't know that the Lord was behind this, that he was looking for a way to attack the Philistines, because at that time they ruled over all Israel. And so Samson's father and mother went down to Timnah, and Samson went down to Timnah, and along the way, as he was passing through vineyards, suddenly a young lion rushed at him, roared, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and he tore that lion apart barehanded, as one might tear apart a young goat. And then he went down to see the woman in Timnah, talk with her. She was the one that he wanted. Sometime later, he came back to Timnah, and passing through the vineyard, he saw the carcass of the lion. Now, he had not told his parents about the lion. But as he passed by, he saw a swarm of bees in the lion and honey. And he scooped up some of that honey and ate it. And he took some to his father and mother, but he didn't tell them where he got the honey. Then his father went to Timnah to talk to the woman, and Samson threw a feast for the young men there, as was the custom of that day. And when the townspeople saw Samson, they sent 30 people to be his companions. Samson said to them, "I have a riddle for you. If you can answer it by the end of the feast, then I will bring you 30 linen robes and 30 sets of clothing. But if you cannot answer it by the end of the feast, then you must give me 30 linen robes and 30 sets of clothing." For 3 days, they were unable to solve the riddle. And on the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, "Seduce your husband and get him to tell you the answer to the riddle. And if you don't, we will set fire to you and your household, because we have not come here to be made poor." And so Samson's wife put her head on his shoulder and said, "You hate me. You don't love me. You told my people a riddle, and you didn't even tell me the answer." But Samson said, "I haven't even told my father and my mother the answer. Why would I tell you?" But she begged and pleaded. And so finally, on the 7th day, because of her continual nagging, he told her the answer. And she immediately told her people the answer. And so on the 7th day, before the sun set, they came to Samson and said, "What's stronger than a lion? And what's sweeter than honey?" And Samson said to them, "If you had not plowed the field with my heifer, you would not have been able to answer my riddle." Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and he went down to Ashkelon. And he killed 30 men there, stripped them of their gear, gathered their things back, and placed them at the feet of the 30 companions. And then in hot anger, he turned back around and went to his parents' house. And his wife was given to one of the companions, the one who had been his best man. Stories of stories. One of the ways that the Bible tells stories, perhaps the way that is most familiar to us, is in the form of parable. Psalm 78 says, "Listen, O my people, to my teaching. Give ear to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable and will utter dark sayings of old, things you have heard and seen, things you have known from your ancestors. We will tell these things to our children. We will not hide them from future generations. We will tell of the glorious deeds of the Lord, of his might, and of his wonderful works." Parables are not only in the New Testament. In fact, one of the parables that you probably have heard, maybe out of context, comes in the larger story of David and Bathsheba. Hear the story. In the spring, when kings go off to war, David sent Joab and his servants and all of Israel. They destroyed the Amorites and attacked the city of Rabbah. But David remained in Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from the couch and was walking on the roof of the king's palace, when from the roof he spied a woman bathing. She was very beautiful. And so David sent someone to inquire about who she was. And it was reported.
This is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, wife of Uriah the Hittite.
And so David sent messengers to bring her to him. She came to him, and he lay with her. Now, she had been purifying herself after her monthly period. Then she went home, and she conceived. Then Bathsheba sent a message to David saying,
I'm pregnant.
So David sent a message to Joab saying, bring me Uriah the Hittite. And when Uriah the Hittite came, David asked about Joab and the army and how the war was going, and then said, go home and wash your feet. And so Joab left, and a gift from the king was sent to him. But Joab, Uriah the Hittite, spent the night outside the king's palace along with the king's servants. He did not go to his house. And in the morning it was reported to David, Uriah the Hittite did not go to his house. And so David invited Uriah the Hittite and said, you've come back from a long journey. Why didn't you go home? And Uriah said, the chest and all Israel and Judah are sleeping in tents, and my master and my master's servants are in the open field. How then can I go home and eat and drink and lie with my wife? I swear on your very life, I will not do that. So David said to Uriah, stay here today, and tomorrow I'll send you home. The next day, David gave Uriah food and drink and got him drunk. But that night, he again slept outside the king's palace. So the next morning, David sent a letter to Joab by the hand of Uriah. And in it, he said, put Uriah at the front of the fiercest battle, and then pull back so that he will be killed. And so when Joab was next attacking the city, he put Uriah the Hittite in a place where he knew there would be strong warriors. And when the city soldiers came out, some of David's servants were killed. And Uriah, the servant, was also killed. Then Joab sent a report of everything that had happened back to David. And this is what he told the messenger. When you have reported all of the news of the battle to the king, if the king gets angry and says, why did you get so close to the city? Didn't you know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Jerubbaal's son Abimelech? Didn't a woman drop an upper millstone on him so that he died at Thebez? Why did you get so close to the wall? And say to him, your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead. When the messenger reported all of this to David, David said, say this to Joab. Don't be upset about this, because the sword is this way, taking the life of this one or that one. Continue attacking the city and destroy it. Encourage Joab. Now, when Uriah's wife heard that her husband, Uriah, was dead, she mourned for her husband. And after the time of mourning, David sent messengers to bring Bathsheba to him. And she became his wife. And she bore him a son. But what he had done was evil in the eyes of the Lord. And so the Lord sent Nathan the prophet to David. And when he arrived, he said, in a certain city, there were two men, one rich and one poor. Now, the rich man had plenty of sheep and cattle. The poor man had nothing, just one little ewe lamb that he had purchased. He raised it with his family. It ate from his food. It drank from his cup. Would even sleep in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now, one day, a visitor came to see the rich man, and the rich man was not willing to take a single sheep or cattle from his herd and flock. Instead, he took that poor man's one little ewe lamb. When David heard this, he became very angry at that man and says, as surely as the Lord lives, this man deserves to die. He must be made to pay sevenfold, because he did this and had no respect for the man. Nathan said to him, you are that man. This is what the Lord, God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel. I delivered you from Saul's power and put his wives into your embrace. I gave you the house of Israel and Jacob. And if that hadn't been enough, I would have given you even more. Why then have you so despised the Lord by doing what is evil in his sight and killing Uriah by the sword and taking his wife as your own? You used the Ammonites to kill him. Because you have done this, because you have so disrespected the Lord, the sword will never leave your house. This is what the Lord God says. I am bringing trouble for you from within your own house. I will take your wives and give them to your best friend, and he will sleep with them in broad daylight. What you did in secret. But what I am doing, I'm doing in the light of all Israel. And then David said, I have sinned. I've sinned before the Lord. And Nathan said, the Lord has forgiven your sin. You won't die. But because you have so utterly disrespected the Lord, the child born to Uriah's wife will certainly die. And then Nathan went home. The Lord struck the child born to Bathsheba, and he became very ill. For 7 days, David wept and begged for the child. He slept on the floor. His senior servants came to him, urging him to get up, but he refused. And he also refused to eat. And on the 7th day, the child died. And his servants were afraid to tell him. They said, we spoke to him when the child was alive, and he didn't listen to us. Why would he listen to us now? The child is dead. We are afraid that he may do himself some harm. But when David saw the servants whispering, he knew the child was dead. And he asked them, is the child dead?
He is dead.
Then David got up, washed his face, anointed himself with oil, put on clean clothes, and went to the house of the Lord and worshiped. And when he returned to his own house, he sat down, and when he asked, they put a plate of food in front of him, and he began to eat. His servant said, why are you doing this? When the child was alive, you wept and fasted and refused to care for yourself. And now that the child is dead, you get up and eat? And David replied, when the child was alive, I begged God for his life because I thought, who knows? Maybe the Lord will be graceful to me, gracious, and the child will live. But the child is sleeping. The child is dead. I can't bring him back. Can he come to me? He cannot. I will go to him, but he cannot come to me. And David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and she bore him a son, and he named him Solomon. And the Lord loved him and sent Nathan to give him a blessing. And he called him Jedediah, that is, beloved of the Lord. because of God's grace. I would invite us to stand, if you wish, do a stretch break, and we will continue in some New Testament stories.
I'm gonna walk a little. Okay.
So, Micah, did you remember to turn on the projector or the camera?
Don't go too far
You
away.
didn't wait for the second for the piece to turn on. Good with the quality control.
There's one taking the pictures out there.
Oh, come on.
Stacy shared her mansion on her post. Yeah, thanks for the anniversary card. That's very nice.
Don't go too far away. We're coming back. Right back.
You never know.
Yeah, well, I think pretty clear.
Did you turn the camera on?
I did. I didn't
For
turn
the
the,
third piece?
I did, I got it. I'm not like Mike.
Really? We went up to see
Go down.
friends
I
in
got one on.
Connecticut for a few days.
No,
And
there's one, the other
then we
one.
had reservations at the circular dining. Haven't been there yet. It's very, very nice, very. And the kids.
So,
Yeah, but I mean,
Okay.
with
I was, yeah.
everything.
It's okay.
It's all right.
Balaam.
But really,
Pretty well.
What's that?
Balaam.
All right. So we can continue. As you gather back in, once upon a time, there were two beautiful women named Truth and Parable, and they lived together on the edge of a town. Each thought that she was the most attractive. And this debate turned into an argument until they finally decided to have a contest to settle the matter once and for all. And the way the contest worked is this. Each would walk to the end of town and back. And whoever received the most attention would be considered the most attractive. And so on the day of the contest, they arrived at the edge of town and Truth decided to go first. She had on just a tiny bit of clothing. And she walked through town, greeting people and waving and smiling. And much to her chagrin, people backed away, went closer to their homes and turned from her. And so by the time she reached the end of town, hardly anyone was outside. She decided to kick things up a notch, and she removed all of her clothing. And as she walked through town, those who were still outside went into their rooms and closed the door and closed the shutters. And so by the time she got back to Parable, the town was almost completely deserted. It looked like a ghost town, completely defeated. She let Parable go next. Parable walked into town, greeted people, modestly, carefully, and people came out curious. They approached her and spoke with her, talked with her, and started talking with one another. And so when parable arrived back to truth, the whole town seemed to be out, talking and happy and engaged. And truth said, I don't understand. Do people not love truth anymore? Parable consoled her and said, people still love truth. They just don't like naked truth. If you want people to understand you and appreciate you, you have to wear the mantle of story. And with that, she took off her multicolored robe and she placed it on Truth's shoulders. And together, hand in hand, they walked into the town. And the people discovered that, yes, indeed, they did still love truth. You probably know this parable. Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. And such a large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat. And he sat in the boat while the large crowd stood on the shore. And he taught them many things in parables, saying, listen, a sower went out to sow seed. And as he sowed, some fell on the path, and birds came and ate it up. Other seed fell on rocky ground where there was not much soil. And because there was not much soil, the plants grew quickly. But when the sun rose, the leaves were scorched, and because they had no roots, they withered away. Some seed fell among thorny plants, and as they grew, the thorns choked them. But some seed fell on good soil, where they produced grain in abundance, some 100-fold, some 60-fold, some 30-fold. Let anyone with ears listen. His disciples came out to him and said, why do you teach them in parables? Jesus said, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. Those who have will be given more, and they will have it in abundance. To those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. The reason I speak to them in parables is that seeing, they don't see, and hearing, they don't hear or understand. This fulfills what the prophet Isaiah said when he said, you will hear, to be sure, but you won't understand. And you will certainly see, but you won't perceive. For this person's heart has grown dull, and they have grown hard of hearing, and they have closed their eyes so that they will not see, and they will not open their ears and hear or understand and turn so that I might heal them. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. And truly, I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but couldn't see it, and long to hear what you hear, but couldn't hear it. Consider then the parable of the sower. Those who hear the word of God but don't understand? The evil one comes and snatches what is sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky soil, this refers to those who hear the word and immediately receive it with joy. But they have no root. And when trouble or persecution on account of the word come, they wither away immediately. As for what was sown among thorny plants, this refers to those who receive the word, but the cares of the world and the allure of wealth choke them so that they produce no fruit. And as for what was sown on good soil, these are those who receive the word and understand it, and it becomes fruitful in them, and they produce in abundance, some 100-fold, some 60-fold, some 30-fold. There was a woman who had a dream, and she dreamt that she was in the marketplace, and there was a new store that had opened up. And she walked in, and who should she see but God behind the counter? And she said, "What do you sell here?" God said, "Everything your heart desires." And so the woman decided to ask for the best things that a human can ask for. I want peace of mind and health and happiness and freedom from worry and then kind of as an afterthought said, and not just for me, but for everyone. God smiled and said, "My dear, I think you have the wrong idea. We don't sell fruits here. Only seeds." Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who sowed good seed, but an enemy came when everyone was asleep and sowed weeds in among the wheat, and then went away. And so the weeds and the wheat grew together. And his servants came to him and said, "Master, didn't you sow good seed? Why then are there weeds in the wheat?" He replied, "An enemy has done this." And they said, do you want us to pull up the weeds?" And he said, "No. Because if you pull them up now, the wheat will be pulled up with it. Wait until the harvest time. And then I will send my reapers to first tie the weeds in bundles and throw them into the fire. But the wheat, gather that in my barn." The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and hid in his field. Although it is the smallest of seeds, it grows to the largest of shrubs and becomes a tree so the birds of the air can come and rest in its branches. And the kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour so that all of it became leavened. When Jesus spoke all of these things to the people in parables, without parables, he did not say anything to them. This was to fulfill what was written by the prophet. "I will open my mouth in a parable. I will tell what has been hidden from days of old." Then he went back into the house, And his disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the wheat and the weeds." And Jesus said to them, "The landowner who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man, and the good seed are children of the kingdom, and the field is the whole earth. The weed are children of the evil one, and the enemy is the devil. The harvest is the end of age, and the reapers are the angels. And at the end of the age, the Son of Man will send his angels to go and divide out the evildoers and causes of sin from among the righteous, and they will be thrown into the furnace of fire where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. And the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of my Father." Then he said to them, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that someone found in a field and buried it, and then went and sold everything that he had, and in his joy, he bought the field." And the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. And upon finding a pearl of great value, he sells everything that he has and purchases the pearl. And again, the kingdom of heaven will be like a net that is thrown into the sea and catches fish of every kind. And when it is full, they drag it to shore and sit down and separate the fish. And they put the good in baskets and throw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age, when the Son of Man will send his angels to separate out the righteous from the unrighteous and throw the unrighteous into the furnace of fire where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. And then Jesus said to the disciples, "Do you understand this?" And they said, "Yes." And Jesus said to them, "Every scribe who is prepared for the kingdom of heaven will be like the owner of a house who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old." Then he left that place and moved on. When I was in seminary, I spent a summer doing clinical pastoral education at a hospital. I was assigned to women's health and neonatal health care. And part of my job that summer was to learn about who I am as a ministering person. And so I would go every day to the floors and greet persons on the census and hope that they would be willing to talk to me, because I didn't have anything else to say to them. And I was still trying to figure out who I was and what I was doing there. One day early on Women's Health, I met a woman who had had a difficult life, and she was willing to talk to me. She was in the hospital for about 2 weeks, and she, each day I came, would unfold a little bit more of her story. A story that had experienced hardship and abuse, times where she had been ignored or put down because she was a woman. And she would ask me questions, and I would very quickly try to deflect because I was there to listen to her, not for her to listen to my stories. One day she said, if I don't know anything about you, then how can we ever connect? I learned many things that summer of CPE, none more from that woman. I learned from her that ministry, beyond listening or preaching, is about connecting with people in real and genuine ways. Her name was Pearl. She was my pearl of great value. While Jesus was teaching, a man stood up and said, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance between us. And Jesus said, friend, who set me as arbitrator between you? But be on guard against all kinds of greed, because life does not consist of one's possessions. And then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, what am I going to do? I don't have room to store all of my crops. Then he thought, here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger barns so that there will be room for all of my crops and goods. And then I will say to myself, self, you have abundant goods stored for many years to come. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God came to him and said, you fool, this very night, your life is being demanded of you, and all that you have prepared, whose will it be? So it is for those who have abundant possessions, but are not rich towards God. A counter story. Two brothers shared a farm and all of its produce. One of them was single. The other was married and had 5 children. Now, the married man one night thought to himself, this isn't fair, that our produce, all that we have, is split right down the middle. Here I am married with 5 children, and my brother is single. I have all that I will need. Who's there to watch over my brother? He has enough now, but he will need more in the future. Clearly, his needs are greater than mine. Not going the way he thought it was it? And so he took a sack of grain from his own granary and he snuck over to his brother's granary and poured it in. Now, he would do this from time to time. And around the same time, his brother had a similar thought, saying, it's not fair that the crops should be divided equally. I have just myself. My poor brother has a wife and 5 children. Clearly, his needs are greater than mine. And so he would take a sack full and bring it over to his brother's granary and pour it in. And this went on for some time until one night they met each other, each with a sack on his back. Years later, the town decided to build a church, and it was unanimous that they would build it on that spot where the brothers met. because there was no place that they deemed holier than that spot. Tony DeMello, in writing about this story, noted that religious devotion is not determined by who worships and who doesn't, but by who loves and who doesn't. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A full measure, pressed down, shaken together, will be put into your lap. Because the measure you give will be the measure you get back. Then Jesus said in a parable, can a blind person lead a blind person? Won't both fall into a pit? Truly, I tell you, a student is not greater than a teacher. But everyone who trains for the kingdom of heaven will be like a teacher. Do not say to your neighbor, there's a speck in your eye. Well, there's a log in your own eye. And don't say to your neighbor, let me take the speck out of your own eye while the log is still in your own eye. You hypocrite. First, take the log out of your own eye. Then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. A full measure. In the 1800s, some of you know this story, a man named Cyrus Bomberger was a teacher, preacher, and farmer in Lebanon County. And he was a man so known for his integrity that when he would bring his grain to the miller would just wave him past because his word was impeccable. His word was his bond. Years later, Andy Murray wrote a song about him. And the chorus, or in the song, he imagines in a verse that not only was Cyrus known in his community when he brought the grain for being an honest man, that he imagined that when he died, Gabriel might say to St. Peter, when Cyrus brings his wagons to the scales of judgment, wave him right on by. If he says his name is written in the book, you can trust it. Some of you know the chorus of the song, and so I invite you to sing it with me if you know it. He's a full measure man, and he won't tell you a lie. When Cyrus brings his wagon to the scale, you can wave him right on by. Level on level, sign with the shake of the hand. Just an unaffected, connected, simple, honest man. Thanks for participating. Jesus told another parable. And he said, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a party for his son, a wedding party. And he sent servants to those who were invited, saying, the wedding is ready. But they did not want to come. And so he sent other servants saying, look, everything is prepared. I have butchered the oxen. I have killed the fatted cattle. Now everything is ready. Come. But they ignored the messengers, the servants. Some went to their businesses, others to their field, and some killed the servants. They took them and abused them and killed them. The king was enraged, and he sent his soldiers to destroy those murderers and to set their city on fire. Then he sent other servants saying, the wedding party is prepared, but those who are invited are not worthy. Now go to the far roads and invite everyone to come. And so his servants went to the far roads at the edge of town and invited everyone they saw, both evil and good. The wedding hall was filled. But when the king came in and saw the guests, he saw one who was not wearing wedding clothes. And he said, "Friend, why are you not wearing wedding clothes?" The friend was speechless. The man was speechless. And so the king ordered his servants to have him bound by hand and foot and thrown out where there is total darkness and weeping and gnashing of teeth. Because many are invited, but few are chosen. This is one of those parables that's hard to take. I can see it's one of your favorites, Nancy. Luke's version is much tamer than that. So maybe a counter story feels a little bit closer to what we might be thinking as we heard that story. This is a story about Mullah Nasruddin. Now, Mullah Nasruddin spent the day working in his field, and his clothes and his shoes were dirty. And because this happened to be during the month of Ramadan, where Muslims fast, he was also quite hungry. The wealthiest person in town had invited everyone to come and break the fast with him. And Mullah Nasruddin realized that the hour was late, and he thought rather than being later by going home and changing first, he would just come as he was. And so he went to the wealthy man's house and he knocked on the door. And the man opened the door, but did not welcome him. He allowed him to come in, but didn't say a word to him. And likewise, none of the people inside seemed to have any words of welcome for him either. Although he tried to get a seat, he noticed that they all seemed to be full, and he had to reach over people to get even a tiny bit of food. And although it looked so good, and he was so hungry, he found he couldn't enjoy being there at all. In fact, it felt like he wasn't there at all. And so he returned home. He changed his clothes, put on his finest coat, and he went back to the house. And this time the host welcomed him with open arms. And the guests inside were so glad to see him. They made room for him, and they passed food to him. And so he took a plump date. He put it in his coat pocket and said, "Eat, coat, eat." And then he took a handful of nuts and put those in his coat pocket, saying, "Eat, coat, eat." Then he began to take food in earnest and shoved it in his coat pockets, and everyone noticed. And the host said, Nasruddin, what are you doing? Nasruddin said, when I came here before, in my other clothes, nobody noticed me. Nobody welcomed me. But when I changed clothes, everyone welcomed me. And so I thought that it's not me that is welcome here, but my coat. And so I'm feeding my coat. I wonder what the man in the parable, what the king in the parable would have said if the man had replied, I'm feeding my coat. Another wedding parable. The kingdom of heaven will be like bridesmaids, 10 bridesmaids waiting for the bridegroom to come. Now 5 of them were foolish. They brought lamps, but no oil. And 5 of them were wise and brought lamps and containers of oil. The bridegroom was late in coming, and all of them became drowsy and fell asleep. And around midnight, someone said, "Look, the bridegroom is coming." Then all of the bridesmaids woke and trimmed their lamps. But the foolish bridesmaids said to the wise bridesmaids, "Look, lend us some of your oil, because our lamps have gone out." The wise bridesmaids said, "No, don't think so. Because if we share our oil with you, there won't be enough for us. We have a better idea. Go to those who sell oil, buy some, and come back." And so they left. But while they were gone, the bridegroom came, and all of those who were ready went in with him, and the door was shut. Later, when the other bridesmaids came back, they said, "Lord, Lord, let us in." But he replied, "Truly, I tell you, I don't know you. So be on guard, because you do not know the day or the hour." It makes me wonder, are there other options? Instead of giving the oil and not having enough for yourself, could they have shared their oil? Could they have walked together? Or maybe they could follow the wisdom from a story of the desert fathers and mothers. Abba Lot, Abba father, went to Abba Joseph and said, "Abba Joseph, what more can I do? I keep my little office. I fast. I pray. I live at peace with others. As far as I am able, I have done everything I can. What more can I do?" Abba Joseph stood up, raised his fingers to heaven, and his fingers became like candles of fire. He said, "Why not become fire? Why not?" Jesus told a story to those who were filled with self-righteousness and looked at others with contempt. He said, 2 men went to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. And the Pharisee stood up thus and said, "I thank you, O Lord, that I am not like others, thieves, rogues, adulterers, like that tax collector. The tax collector would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, I am a sinner, O Lord. Have mercy on me. I tell you, it was that man, rather than this man, who went to his home justified. Amy Jill Levine, a Jewish New Testament scholar, suggests that another translation of that story is not just that the tax collector went home justified rather than the Pharisee, but the tax collector went home justified alongside the Pharisee. Who knows? There was a bishop who was visiting a church, and he was so moved with piety that he beat his breast and said, have mercy on me, a sinner. The priest was inspired by the bishop, and he got on his knees and said, have mercy on me, a sinner. Now, the sexton happened to be in the sanctuary, and he was so inspired by this act of piety that he too got on his knees and beat his breast, saying, have mercy on me, a sinner. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Whereupon the bishop nudged the priest with a smile and wink, said, look who thinks he's a sinner. When the Son of Man comes in all his glory, he will separate the nations as a shepherd separates the goats from the sheep. And he will put the goats on his left side. Sorry, you're the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right side. You're the sheep. Then he will say to those on his right side, come, you who are blessed, enter into my Father's kingdom. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothes. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me. And those on his right will say to him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you drink, or a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and visited you, or sick and in prison and visited you? And he would say to them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who were members of my family, you did it to me. And then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed. Go into the fire that is prepared for the devil and his angels. Because I was hungry and you didn't give me food. I was thirsty and you didn't give me something to drink. I was a stranger and you didn't welcome me. I was naked and you didn't give me clothes. I was sick and in prison and you didn't visit me. And then those on his left will say, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and didn't take care of you? And he will say to them, just as you did not do it for the least of these who are members of my family, you did not do it for me. I want to thank you for being such a great audience, for your presence. And I want to close, if you're willing, with a song. I invite you to join with me in the chorus. If you don't know it, you will probably learn it by the time we're done. The chorus goes like this. We are not going away. We are not going away. God blesses the children who stand up and say, we are not going away. There once was a man, so Jesus has told, who traveled many a day. He knocked late at night on his friend's front door and heard a voice inside say, now we're all in bed for the night, old pal. We're in for the night, I say. It's much too late for your room and your board. No hard feelings, but please go away. And the man he did knock and the man he did pound till the rooster crowed in the day. And the weary friend finally opened the door and asked him in to stay. And Jesus said, God gives more freely than this, if only we will pray. So sisters and brothers, believe in his word, we are not going away. We are not going away. We are not going away. God blesses the children who stand up and say, we are not going away. There once was a judge, so Jesus has told, who thought he could live on his own. But there was a widow who had a case and would not leave him alone. Now the judge cared not for people or God, and he wished that the widow were dead. But just to get the old gal off his back, he granted her wishes instead. And Jesus said, God gives more freely than this, if only we will pray. So sisters and brothers, believe in his word, we are not going away. We are not going away. We are not going away. God blesses the children who stand up and say, we are not going away. Now Jacob wrestled an angel at dawn. That sure seems like a dumb thing to do. But the angel gave him a name and a blessing, because Israel would not let go. And the prophet Elisha was much too busy to perform resurrections one day. But he raised the son of the Shunammite woman because she would not go away. And we believe God gives more freely than this, if only we will pray. So sisters and brothers, believe in his word, we are not going away. We are not going away. We are not going away. God blesses the children who stand up and say, we are not going away. Jesus' people hated the Canaanites, thought they were lost in sin. So Jesus himself was caught by surprise when a woman of Canaan came in. And when he compared her people to dogs, she did not flee or sway. And she changed the mind of the Lord, and he blessed her because she would not go away. Now Herod thought when Rome put him to death that in the grave Jesus would lay. But just like our Lord, we are rising again. We are not going away. We are not going away. We are not going away. God blesses the children who stand up and say, we are not going away. Now Jesus says seek, and Jesus says ask, and Jesus says knock on the door. And it will be given, and you will find, and it will be open for sure. Now you might shut us out and go hide in your room, out of sight, out of mind, you might say. But we believe in the promise of Jesus, and we are not going away. And we're partnered and single, we're wealthy and poor, we're straight and we're lesbian and gay. We're brown and pink and all shades in between, we're young and lived many a day. And we're singing and praying in spirit and soul. Try to ignore us, you may. But why not get to know us? We'll be here a while. We are not going away. We are not going away. We are not going away.
God blesses the children who stand up and say, we are not going away.
That song is by Lee Cranbuell, with permission to use it, sung on a group called Kindling. So I want to give props to them, and also want to give thanks to the network of biblical storytellers through whom I have learned these stories, and the Academy for Biblical Storytelling. Thank you so much to you as the audience, because without an audience, there would be no story.